Hello, and welcome to another edition of TMS TV. I'm here with Angus McIntyre. So I'd like to thank you for sharing your experiences. Is there something that I haven't asked that you would like to say?
Well, I could tell you a few anecdotes of experiences that happened over the years. Um, I had virtually no assaults, even though I worked evenings. Um, in those days, I was spit on twice on the Granville Mall through the open window of the bus. Just before I retired, a few years before I retired, I had a soft drink thrown on me down at Hastings and Carroll. Um, Other than that, physically, I was never attacked. And in the 1970s, there were problems with people throwing things at the bus, like rocks and bottles. Even guns were shot on the east side, um, attacking the transit system. There was a generation of younger people, and maybe not all younger, um, that took vengeance on the transit system in the early to mid 70s. And by the 1990s, that was gone. The city had changed. So there wasn't near, I mean, I had so many broken windows from rocks thrown and things thrown at the bus just in regular service at that time. That's something you don't hear much about, but that's what was going on. There were drivers that left the Nanaimo bus, they didn't work it because there'd been a couple of gunshots taken at the buses. So, but on a happier note, I had passengers that provided entertainment on the bus. These were passengers that were eclectic, were characters in their own site, eccentric, um, harmless, but just unbelievable things that would happen. So at Victoria and Powell, there's the Princeton Hotel, and the Princeton Hotel has a beer parlor that catered to a lot of the longshoremen down on the waterfront in those days. And quite often they'd get on with a case of 12 stubby beer bottles. Like they didn't have cans, then all the beer was in bottles. And they'd have a case to take home with them. And usually they'd already had something to drink. So in some cases, here they are. And they had they boarded the bus, usually around 9:30 or 10 p.m., going east on Powell Street at the Princeton. And there would be a lot of Portuguese, Italian cleaning ladies on the bus who would do a shift cleaning the office buildings downtown and then take the bus to go home. And there'd be quite a full load of these ladies. So on three occasions at the Princeton Hotel over a period of a year or two, men would get on to pay their fare, but carrying the case of beer, and they weren't properly attired, and so their pants fell down to the floor. And either the case of beer went to the floor and broke the bottles, or their pants went to the floor. The beer never hit the floor. It was always their pants. And in one case, it was total exposure to all these women as he tried to pull himself together. And there we got up to Hastings and Nanaimo, where he got off to transfer to go wherever he was going. And then all the women are yakking away and talking, right? So that sort of thing was a feature of Powell Street. Um, we had a regular passenger named Peggy Abbott, who would get on at Woodward's on a Friday night, usually when I had a trainee. 1972 to 76, I had trainees almost every Friday night, sometimes new women drivers. And so I always had to warn the trainee about Peggy because she was apparently a retired school teacher, and she had gone to Woodward's to get some groceries and do some shopping. But then she'd go to the Grand Union or the Metropole Hotel afterwards to visit with her friends. She'd always in a nice two-piece suit and her hair was done. She was always nicely done up, and have some drinks. But then when she went to get the bus home at 9 o'clock behind Woodward's, sometimes one of the men from the pub would have to actually help carry her grocery bags because she was a little unsteady on her feet. And then she'd get on the bus and she'd sit down there and I'd chat with her because the trainee would be driving and the bus would roll along and she had quite a gravelly voice. So she'd be quiet for a while and then we get to Hastings and Nanaimo and you'd be sitting there in silence on the trolley and suddenly this voice, because she lived with her daughter and grandson on Slocan, this voice would suddenly pipe up and say, I'm gonna get shit when I get home, like this. And of course, everybody shocked. Her language could be pretty colorful. And then you get to her house, which was not a bus stop, but you could stop with the front door right where her front door of the house was. And you get out and you carry her bags in. And of course, the daughter and the grandson are already waiting to greet her. But before she'd get off the bus, you'd have to warn the trainee. She'd give you a quarter, 25 cents for a cup of coffee, and then lunge at you for a big hug and a smoochy kiss with all this makeup and everything else. So I said, just put up your arm, so that, you don't have to, just be prepared that she's going to try to give you a hug and a kiss when she gives you this tip. And so the years went by and every so often Peggy was on and all the passengers got to know her. I came down Cordova Street around the curve one night and all these flashing lights were there behind Woodward's. And I thought, uh-oh, what's going on here? And there was a sports car up on the sidewalk, just past the bus stop. And um, all the people that were getting onto onto my Nanaimo bus were getting on and Peggy wasn't there. And I thought she should be. And one of the women boarding the bus said, you know that old lady that gets on all the time? I said, yeah. I said, Peggy? And she said, yeah. Um, that car came around the curve so fast, everybody got out of the way except her, and she was hit. And they've taken her away in an ambulance. And I said, well, do you know how badly she was hurt? And this lady said, well, as they were loading her into the ambulance, she was yelling out, I need a drink. And about a month later, Peggy was down there with her boyfriends from the pub, uh, waiting for the bus with her groceries from Woodward. So, those type of passengers that became your regulars, the night shift workers that worked at the post office, the sorters at the post office at midnight, those night trips, it became like a family. So we'd all sit there and wait 10 minutes to make your connections. And you'd sit there and you'd all chat about current events and things going on. And then you'd let them off um, at their house where they're or closer to where they lived instead of the bus stop. So again, that was another advantage of working evenings. I think it was more of a social time with the passengers that you just didn't have time for in the daytime. Um, so yeah, the entertainment value sometimes. Um, I once had the entire Saskatchewan band for the Grey Cup. Speaking of Grey Cup today, for the football game, the band from Saskatchewan boarded the bus down at Maine and Cordova, Maine and Powell, to ride up into downtown. And they played on the bus. They had all their instruments and they just played on the bus. And of course, the passengers are on, and then we get all the way up, and everybody's hearing this. So, um, a group of school kids, every so often there were these things. And one of the comments people would say, I don't know how you could just drive the same route back and forth all the time, just well, it wasn't like that. There was variety, there was fun, entertainment, and sadly, every so often, somebody wouldn't show up, and you know that they died or something had happened. One of the passengers, got arrested for theft from the post office, and I read about it on the bus going on my day off, and I saw this name, and I thought, "Oh my goodness." So, of course, the post office workers, a couple of days later, when I pull in, he's not there with them. He was part of the group. And of course, Irene and all these, they're all getting on. And I say, "Oh, I've already read about it. We all, no."
So what happened on your final night?
Well, there were two final nights actually. So, what the company did was they said, you can work your final shift, um, for pay, but we will pay you your full day's pay for your final day, but you don't have to work it. You can go out and ride on your bus, right? And visit with people and so on, and just let the other driver go. Um, so I said, well, actually, what I would like to do is take the two Brill trolleys, 2040 and 2416, and have my regular passengers and friends and coworkers um, ride 2 round trips and follow my regular run on the Dunbar and Nanaimo, do 2 round trips. So the day before, which was the Sunday, um, my sister had come from Winnipeg. My brother was here from Toronto. There were friends from Seattle and from Portland, and a number of people I'd known for years that all came here for the farewell trip 14 years ago. And so we just organized all that. But the Sunday night I did a main Victoria. So my first night on my own out of training was a Granville, Victoria on a Sunday night, evening shift. My last day was a main Victoria. So I drove Victoria Drive on a Sunday. That was my last full working day. Now, my brother was on the bus on that evening on Main Street. I was wearing this uniform. I was exactly like this. And at Broadway and Main, driving an articulated trolley, which I really enjoyed, stayed on for a few extra years for that and for the Winter Olympics, right? But this young woman got on as a passenger, and she said, "Oh, what's with the duds? Why are you wearing this old uniform?" And I said, "Well, it's my last day. Tomorrow I retire." And she said, "Oh, I work for CBC Radio One. Would you like to do a live drive home show interview?" I said, "Sure." And she said, "Do you have a cell phone?" And I said, "No, but my brother does." So I got on the PA system. I said, "Rob, come up to the front." So my brother came up. And so she got his cell phone number and my home number. So the next morning, CBC, they phoned me, and we got a series of questions that can be asked by the host. So before we did the first trip with the Brill trolley at Oak Ridge, we were in the yard. All the people that are going to board are waiting out on the side front of the Oak Ridge garage. So I'm sitting in the yard, and we knew the time. And sure enough, my brother's cell phone rang, and there was the host of the Drive Hope program, which was just before 6 o'clock, I think, quarter to 6. And I got 7.5 minutes of questions and answer, which I do have on my computer. I've got that at home. I've saved that. And so that was another fun part. So the final 2 round trips, the weather was nice. It was June the 1st. And we had probably 60 or 70 people divided between the two buses. What I didn't know was my operations supervisor. He had notified a group of a pickup band of musicians called the Carnival Players. They normally rehearsed at the Britannia Community Center on a Monday night. But he said, "Why don't you go and rehearse at Nanaimo Station at 7 p.m. on Monday night because there are 2 Brill trolleys gonna come in there for 15 minutes. And so, a photographer, Wayne, took a whole series of pictures, which are, posted. Um, Not only did they play the music and I danced with them, we did a street party. We had a street party at Nanaimo Station, impromptu, just like that. As I was driving up, I was the first of the 2 Brill trolleys. As I was driving up, I thought, "I can hear some music somewhere. I wonder where it's coming from," and I turned in. My operations supervisor came out the night before, and he presented me with a bus stop sign with my, name, years of service, and the different, transit systems logos. So, I had done so much volunteer work over the years with, the transit system, including, media stuff, for various things that when it came time to, retire, um, there was no question. I just went ahead and organized all this, and, they certainly didn't say anything. And so I think I had enough, credibility at that point to have a blowout. And, um, I've been on other drivers' last nights when they've had their last night, but, I think it was fitting to end a career like that. Yet, to this day, I still have my Class 2 license, and I still get behind the wheel and drive for various, events and parades and so on. So, um, the part that a lot of people don't understand is when your hobby and your job are the same thing. When you retire, nothing changes. You're essentially just doing what you've always done because the 2 aspects, are the same thing. Very few people have that ability. So even on the worst day of, traffic and snow and everything, going wrong on the bus and so on, and you're exhausted when the day was over, um, I still never felt, bitter about the job. I took whatever it's put at me, and, so that retirement, at the time, was the best thing I did because each day when you're, um, on a job that's so time dependent and you're always having to look at the watch and keep your time, um, I don't wear a watch anymore. Now, I know if my phone or in the car, I know what the time is at home. But, um, when I retired, the first thing I did was, I didn't pay attention to the time, but I started to do some things I hadn't done before. I go to a lot more events and talks and activities and movies and stuff than I used to.
Uh,
But, so, retirement, for me, hasn't exactly been, retirement where I'm not doing anything. I'm very busy, uh,
mhm,
with other things besides transit too, but,
yeah. Well, thank you very much, Angus. And I hope everybody has enjoyed listening to Angus. And we'll have another episode of TMS TV next week.